Okay, so the first question is underline a sentence that you find particularly powerful. And one sentence that I find pretty powerful, it says, our true war story is never moral. Mostly because when I personally think about morality, I think about death. And, you know, obviously war is not free from death, and there's a lot of it.
Yeah.
I agree. I agree that the sentence is powerful, but I see it a completely different way. Like, yeah, it's not moral, but I just see it as while in war, there's certain things that no longer matter.
I find it very contradictory. So that's why I think it stands out for me as opposed to many other sentences, because it really contradicts a lot of things. Not necessarily my beliefs, but you know, things that happen in a war and the way that they're describing it. So number 2, the narrator tells the story of Kurt Lemon's death several times. How does it change with each retelling? How does retelling that scene in several different ways contribute to the story as a whole?
So,
With each time that it says it's just more detail, and I guess it kind of gets rid of more of what he was feeling when he saw it happen. But even then, it just kind of gets overwhelming.
I feel like the more he repeats it, the more he makes us remember it.
Yeah, and like depending on the details he gives us in between, we start to see it from a different point of view. So that's really cool.
And it sticks with us more.
yeah, I think repetition in particular, like in all forms of literature, it helps emphasize the message, and I feel like what they're trying to say with Kurt Lemon's death is that, like what Heriberto said earlier, is that in war there's just depth, you know? Yeah.
Okay, so also I feel like this is a very good example. So oftentimes when we tell a story many times, like there are details that do get changed because even like if it's something that you knew really well, a lot of people their perspective on it tends to change throughout their lives through different experiences. Like for example, you might ask somebody at one time like, hey, what was skydiving like? And they might say super scary. However, 10 years later, they might find that was an experience that they really enjoyed. Just based on the experiences that they have had in life, their perspective on a story changes. However, that doesn't really change throughout the story, which is something that's pretty interesting.
It depends on like which aspect of life you're in, because like if you're older, like you get to learn from it. And then,
Even like as teenagers, they might be like, oh yeah, I hated my parents, they suck. And then, you know, all of a sudden they're older and then they have parents that are dead and then they regret a lot of things.
Yeah.
And like take Haber's example when he said like, oh, I read this book a lot, and you know, like every time
like he finds something new.
You find new details.
Yeah.
Even as something that's more objective as like maybe science. Like I know that when I research textbooks for different science topics, I often find new details that I didn't notice before, or like stuff that makes learning the content easier.
Yeah.
I just feel like the more you observe something, after you know certain things, you stop looking for those things and
you move on.
Yeah, because you know those things are already just almost second nature to you. So the next question, why do you think Wright Kiley shoots the baby buffalo in the manner he does? The whole scene never happened. The narrator tells us that at the end, but is it true? Why do you think O'Brien depicts the scene? Why is it a baby buffalo? What details does he seem to want the reader to focus on? Why? Well, Haber made the example that it could have been a human, but he said that it's an animal so that it feels like there's more of an impact. However, I don't even know what a water buffalo is, to be honest, and I can't even picture it in my head because I don't know what it is. So personally, I don't find an impact just because I have no connection with the animal.
I think Tim O'Brien's use of water buffaloes isn't like to sympathize with us. It's more like to symbolize innocence because it's a baby water buffalo.
And when he kills it, it basically recalls the end of innocence.
I like the example. I think it was Leo that said like, what if it represented?
Yeah.
What was the town?
Mikey. Yeah.
That town, I feel like when they completely destroyed the town, I feel like it represented that pretty good because they were pretty much defenseless, unarmed.
And the way they shot.
So you're saying like it's symbolic.
Yeah, the innocence of the villagers.
And it's not even having to do with innocence, it's just like complete helplessness.
Yeah.
It's also like in a movie, a horror movie, like oftentimes like, you know, a human will die I, for some reason, tend to laugh at death, like in movies, because the way they depict it in movies is funny. However, as soon as the dog dies, I'm in tears. And so that's basically, I think that's the same technique that he's trying to use.
If you guys remember, like in the war video, they were giving them food at first, and then they suddenly started like burning the villages down. So maybe like could have been that situation. That's what he was trying to symbolize or signify.
Makes sense. All right, and then we're going to move on to question 4. The title of this piece suggests that the story will ultimately explain or give instructions for telling a true war story. So how does one tell a true war story?
Ooh, I have no sentence for that.
So I feel like it's not, the title for me is kind of misleading, because when I imagine that, I imagine, you know, just a list of like bullet points or something like that. Literally tells you, like, a list of steps how to write a war story. However, this is a lot more of a narrative way of, like, you know, the author telling you how to write a war story. And I feel like you really have to pay attention more to the little details to actually get that out of reading it.
I feel like that helps though, because like he's telling you how to do it while doing it through his experience.
Yeah.
So, but I think the more you pay attention to it, that way it's a lot easier for you to actually listen to the story and not just hear it and let it go out one ear. The more you listen to it, the more you understand about it.
Yeah, because like by doing it in a narrative, you don't just look at it through like, oh, this is how you do it, because it's more complicated than that. That's what he's like trying to say.
Yeah.
And to add on to that, Tim O'Brien makes a good point when he says in page 79, you can tell a true war story by the questions you ask. Somebody tells a story, let's say, and afterward you ask, is it true? And if the answer matters, you've got your answer. So essentially what he's saying here is that a war story is like based on like questions, like
like how Henry had to pry from his dad.
Okay, I think I understand that, because, like, you know, if you ask certain questions, you might be able to find little details that don't line up.
So it's kind of like a narrative.
And like little more specific questions you ask, you might hit like certain bumps where you don't want to.
Yeah.
What were you gonna say?
I was gonna say that he says that you could tell that if it's a true war story by its absolute and uncompromising allegiance to obscenity and evil. He talks about how most war stories are always uplifting in the end, but most war stories are the exact opposite.
Yeah, because it's about war.
Yeah, so like
There's
basically,
never really anything good happening.
there you go.
So essentially, I guess, by telling it, you have to really dissect it and basically ask yourself all the why questions to find if it's actually something good.
Because there's no
If it's
documentation.
truthful.
There's no true accounts for.
It's by word of mouth. Like
Yeah.
that's what a true war story is.
Yeah. Okay, so next question is, what have the particular difficulties, according to this narrator, in telling the events of war? What is the narrator saying about truth, and what do we understand it, and how do we understand it?
Interesting.
Like going back through the details, maybe like the actual Kurt Lemon's death. Like he was like, oh, it's hard to explain. Kept saying that until the end. He's like, because nobody likes to go back to those experiences. So
I think what he's trying to say about truth is just that the book may not necessarily have happened the way he's telling it, but like the truth about the feeling that you get while you're there and how you react to it.
And these things always happen during war anyway.
And so in some ways it's like mendable, almost like you can bend it.
Yeah. Malleable.
Malleable. Or
Yeah.
But it's also like, you know, someone finding the truth also.
Yeah.
And then the next question, what do you think was truly happening when the men were talking about hearing the music while in the bush? I personally do think it could have been hallucination, especially if they're dehydrated. Because sleep deprivation and dehydration, these are all things that start to give you hallucinations, especially when it starts to throw off your electrolyte balance. That's me thinking about it from a physiological perspective, because those kinds of things do happen with the body, and so if anything, that's what I think it would have been. And you know, those are probably just memories that they had in their mind that they're suddenly putting into the war, that they're associating it with the war, and that's what they were hearing.
yeah, maybe they were like going through such a tough like they're in their body they were stressing out so much that they wanted to like.
They wanted to hear something.
Yeah, so it's like a psychological
Yeah.
defense mechanism.
Okay, so they're trained to not do that.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying, out there in the wilderness on the wind, it makes a bunch of different noises.
Yeah.
All one guy had to do was say it sounded like a specific object, and the rest would constantly be thinking about it and looking for that sound.
They're like almost, they're socially conforming to what other people
It's a it's a psychological.
And it's a
Yeah.
psychological thing. So I think it was mostly psychological. I don't think that there were. I doubt there was a time in war history, like throughout the Civil War, when there were actually musicians out in the war field because they didn't have fancy communication systems and they used music to communicate. However, that was not a thing in the Vietnam War. So I doubt that it was actually music.
Yeah, maybe it's like
It's a
their
self-confirming
way.
bias.
Yeah.
Maybe it's their way of like finding closure away from home, like music.
They needed something.
Yeah, they need something, and it was
Anything
music.
would work, and
Yeah.
that's what.
Okay, we're gonna move on to the next question. Why do you think Tim O'Brien that asserts that war is also a beauty? I really think.
Interesting.
Well, I'm very anti-war, but I feel like, for example, with World War II, all of a sudden, women were starting to get jobs and there started to be more equality within these two genders. You see the women say that home are doing all the housework and everything. However, there was such a high demand for goods during this time that they needed everybody's help, and this changed everything now. Like it used to be, women were, they only were either you saw them as teachers, maybe secretaries. Now you see them as senators, you see them as doctors, you see them as many other CEOs and everything. So I feel like this also really brought a lot of positive things. So that's why I think that it could be beautiful, not that way. Not necessarily the war is beautiful.
What I think he meant by that is, through your experiences at war, you get to see what type of person you actually are and what type of person you want to strive to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
you see what you are and what you want to be. You get to try and make the gap smaller.
It's like a violent therapy.
Yeah, like remember when you mentioned that the path to happiness is like,
Yeah, like Haber said,
Yeah.
it's like there's the person that you are and there's the person that you want to be.
and the closer they get, the
Experiences
happier
like
you are.
that, you the closest image of both.
I
Yeah.
feel like especially because this has a big impact on your life. It can be either negative or positive. And I mostly hear the negative sides of it from with like PTSD and all these other negative aspects, but of war. But
Like it's also like the relationships you build, like
with yourself
with yourself and like the other soldiers,
and like the
around you.
self-discipline you create. Yeah, that's a very interesting one. In the beginning, the author tells the audience that it is a true war story. But towards the end, when he was talking about the woman, he tells her that none of it happened. So is Tim O'Brien really telling the truth? Well, not really I wouldn't be able to tell from simply just this, but knowing that he said none of this happened, I know that he was obviously lying. However, it seemed pretty legit to me, and I would not have been able to tell had he not said that it was all a lie.
I think we all knew that he was lying, but I think the experiences or the emotions that I guess that it gave us would be like the emotions that they had.
Yeah.
We'll just voice over this at this point.
Yeah.